Maria, a 68-year-old woman, slowly made her way through the busy parking lot, the cold winter air biting at her skin as she clutched several gift bags in her hands. She hadn't seen her daughter, Carla, or her grandchildren in over 3 years, and the loneliness she'd grown accustomed to had become almost unbearable. The absence of her family, especially after the death of her husband, left a void in her heart that seemed impossible to fill. But this Christmas was different. This year, Carla and the kids were coming to visit, and Maria couldn't have been more excited. For once, the heavy weight of solitude seemed to lift as she looked forward to a warm, joyful reunion. The thought of spending Christmas surrounded by the laughter of her loved ones filled her with a deep sense of hope. Despite the pain in her knees from years of wear and tear and the emotional toll of the past few years, Maria walked with purpose through the parking lot, feeling the anticipation of the special evening ahead. It had been a long time since she had felt this kind of excitement, and for a moment the world felt brighter. Christmas was coming, and with it the promise of love, family, and togetherness. As Maria continued her walk, the bustling sounds of the parking lot surrounded her, the hurried footsteps of shoppers, the screeching of tires, and the distant hum of car engines. She focused on getting to her car, her hands tightly gripping the gift bags that held the promise of joy and love. Yet something felt off. A voice from nearby caught her attention. A woman on the phone, her tone filled with frustration. "A crazy guy on a motorcycle almost ran me over at the entrance," she said, her words hanging in the air, making Maria's heart race. Something about the woman's voice unsettled her, a sense of unease creeping into her chest. She looked around, but nothing seemed out of place. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that danger was near. The night seemed darker, colder, and the parking lot lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. Maria quickened her pace, trying to dismiss the anxiety building inside her. But then she saw him, a man standing next to a motorcycle, his eyes watching her with an intensity that made her stomach twist. His gaze felt like ice, cold and predatory. She quickly averted her eyes, but the feeling of dread stayed with her, growing stronger with each step she took. Something terrible was about to happen. Maria's heart began to race as she neared her car, the familiar weight of her gift bags feeling heavier with each step. The cold air stung her face, and the pain in her knees reminded her of the years that had passed, the years of loneliness and heartache. Yet today, as she walked toward the car, there was a flicker of hope in her heart, the promise of a warm Christmas reunion with her daughter and grandchildren. But something wasn't right. The unsettling feeling she'd tried to push away began to resurface. As she approached the car, she heard the loud roar of a motorcycle engine, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once, surrounding her, closing in on her. Suddenly, she felt it, his presence. The motorcyclist was there, a looming figure in black leather, his eyes locked on her. For a split second, their gazes met, and Maria felt an icy shiver run down her spine. There was something in his stare, a coldness, a cruel intensity that left her feeling vulnerable and exposed. She tried to push the thought away, convincing herself that it was just her imagination running wild. But the engine revved again, louder this time, as if to warn her that danger was lurking just beyond the edge of her vision. She tried to move faster, but it was as if her legs were betraying her. The fear gripped her chest, squeezing tighter with every step. And then, just as she thought she might make it to safety, the motorcyclist sped toward her, cutting off her path with frightening precision. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled backward, her breath quickening, but it was too late. He was already there, blocking her way. The Christmas spirit she had been holding onto so tightly seemed to slip further and further away, replaced by the crushing reality of a nightmare she never saw coming. Maria's pulse was racing, her heart hammering in her chest as the motorcyclist loomed closer, his engine growling like a predator closing in on its prey. Every step she took felt like an eternity, the cold asphalt beneath her feet seeming to stretch further with each movement. She gripped the bags tightly, as if they could somehow protect her from the terrifying force bearing down on her. Her mind raced with desperate thoughts, but no solution came to her, just the overwhelming feeling that she was trapped, that she had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Then, as if on cue, the motorcyclist revved the engine, the sound vibrating in the pit of her stomach. He was circling her now, slowly, almost methodically, like a shark in the water, watching her with a cruel, mocking smile. His eyes gleamed with sadistic amusement as he taunted her, his voice cutting through the air with sharp, jagged words. "Hey, Grandma!" Maria's knees felt weak, and she struggled to stay on her feet as the weight of the situation pressed down on her, threatening to crush her spirit. She tried to change direction, desperate to reach her car, but the motorcyclist moved with terrifying precision, blocking her every escape. His mocking voice followed her, like a nightmare that refused to end. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his words dripping with sarcasm. But Maria couldn't speak, couldn't summon the strength to respond. All she could do was hold onto the bags with all her might, trying to protect the gifts that represented the love and joy she was hoping to share with her family. But even those small, simple items felt powerless against the cruelty of the situation. As she tried to take a few quick steps away, her foot caught on a small bump in the pavement, and before she could react, she tumbled to the ground. Pain shot through her knee as it slammed against the cold asphalt, and her glasses slipped off her face. She gasped in shock, the wind knocked out of her. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation and fear that overwhelmed her. The motorcyclist circled her like a vulture, his laughter ringing in her ears as he kicked one of the presents she had worked so hard to protect. "What a Christmas spirit, huh? Those grandkids won't even know what they missed," he mocked, his cruel words cutting deeper than any physical blow. Maria's heart sank. She was so close to giving up, to letting the despair take over. But just as she was about to surrender to the darkness of the moment, something shifted. From the shadows, a figure emerged, calm and composed. It was a man, walking toward the scene with steady, purposeful steps. He didn't rush, didn't shout. He just moved forward, a quiet presence that seemed to change the atmosphere around him. It was Keanu Reeves. His expression was serious, but there was something about him, something strong and unyielding, that made the air feel heavier, as if he was about to make everything right again. "Hey," Keanu called out, his voice firm but calm, cutting through the motorcyclist's laughter. "Drop it and leave." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The motorcyclist stopped, turning to face Keanu with a look of disdain, as if he didn't believe the man could possibly be serious. But Keanu didn't flinch. He stood there, unwavering, and the motorcyclist realized, perhaps too late, that his night was about to take a very different turn. The motorcyclist sneered and pulled a knife from his pocket, twirling it in his hand like a toy, his bravado swelling in the face of danger. He took a few steps toward Keanu, the knife gleaming in the dim light. But Keanu didn't back down. His eyes never left the man as he spoke again, his voice steady and calm. "You still have a chance to walk away from this, but if you don't, there will be consequences." The motorcyclist lunged at Keanu, the knife aimed at his chest, but Keanu was faster. In one swift motion, he disarmed the man, sending the knife clattering to the ground. The motorcyclist swung at him in a desperate rage, but Keanu dodged effortlessly, using the momentum to bring him to the ground. The motorcyclist struggled, shouting insults and threats, but Keanu remained calm, his grip unshakable. "You think bullying weaker people makes you strong?" Keanu asked quietly, his voice carrying a weight of truth. "It doesn't. It gets you nowhere." He pinned the motorcyclist to the ground, his movements precise and controlled. The motorcyclist thrashed, but it was no use. Keanu had him in a hold that rendered him powerless. Maria, still on the ground, watched in disbelief. She could hardly believe what was happening. Her body trembled, not just from the physical pain, but from the overwhelming gratitude and relief that flooded her chest. She had been afraid, but now, for the first time that night, she felt safe. Keanu had saved her. Not just from the motorcyclist, but from the fear that had gripped her heart. And in that moment she realized that sometimes heroes appear when you least expect them, and their actions can change everything. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, the tension in the air began to dissolve. Keanu held the motorcyclist firmly, his calm demeanor unwavering as the police car screeched to a halt. Maria, still on the ground, her knee aching from the fall, watched in awe as the officers swiftly took control of the situation. The motorcyclist, who had once been so full of bravado, now lay helpless on the pavement, his arrogant demeanor replaced by frustration and defeat. Keanu's presence had turned the entire situation around, transforming a moment of fear and vulnerability into one of undeniable strength and courage. The officers moved quickly, one of them flipping the motorcyclist onto his stomach and cuffing him, while another approached Maria with a gentle concern. "Ma'am, are you all right? Are you hurt?" The officer's voice was kind, a stark contrast to the cruelty Maria had just experienced. She tried to speak, but her voice trembled, overcome with emotion. The words caught in her throat as she looked at the scattered gifts and the ruined Christmas spirit that had once filled her heart with joy. But now, the darkness had been lifted. She was safe. Keanu stood nearby, his eyes never leaving the motorcyclist, who now grumbled in defeat. Maria finally managed to gather herself, her hands still shaking, and looked up at Keanu. His presence had been a silent force, one that had given her the strength to stand up against the nightmare she had faced. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with gratitude. "You saved more than just my presence. You saved my Christmas." Keanu offered a faint smile, his eyes softening as he nodded. "I'm glad I could help," he said, his tone steady and reassuring. "No one should have to go through something like that, especially on Christmas." With a final glance at Maria, he turned and began walking toward his car, leaving behind a sense of peace that Maria hadn't felt in years. As the police loaded the motorcyclist into the squad car, Maria felt the weight of the night's events begin to lift. The nightmare that had threatened to ruin her Christmas had been replaced by a moment of unexpected kindness. Maria watched Keanu disappear into the night, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of hope. Christmas was about love, family, and the unexpected heroes who step in when you need them the most. And Maria knew that, despite everything, this Christmas would still be one to remember. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through her window, Maria awoke to the faint ache in her knee, a reminder of the brutal fall she had taken the night before. Yet, despite the lingering pain, there was a warmth in her heart that hadn't been there in years. The chaos and fear that had clouded her mind were gone, replaced by a quiet sense of relief and gratitude. She thought about the motorcyclist, his cruel laughter, his mocking words, and how he had tried to ruin what was supposed to be a joyful night. But then she remembered Keanu, how he had stepped in without hesitation, how his calm presence had cut through the tension and brought everything to a standstill. The image of him standing over the motorcyclist, disarming him with quiet precision, stayed with her. Maria had lived a long life, and she had seen many things. She had loved, lost, and learned how to carry the weight of grief. But last night, something had changed within her. She had learned that there were still good people in the world, people who would stand up for you when you were too scared to stand up for yourself. Keanu had been her hero, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional one as well. He had reminded her that even in her darkest moments, she wasn't truly alone. The kindness he had shown her, his quiet strength, his refusal to let cruelty win, had restored something within her. It wasn't just her presence he had saved, it was her hope. As Maria carefully rewrapped the damaged gifts that morning, her hands moved with a tenderness she hadn't felt in a long time. The physical pain in her knee was there, but it no longer seemed to matter as much. Her heart was full, brimming with a quiet, steady hope that she had almost forgotten existed. Christmas, she realized, wasn't just about the presents or the decorations. It wasn't about the things you could touch or unwrap. It was about something deeper, something intangible. It was about love, about the people who made you feel safe, about the moments of kindness that carried you through the hardest times. And this Christmas, she had been given a gift that couldn't be wrapped in paper or tied with a bow. She had been reminded of the goodness that still existed in the world. Later that day, when Carlo arrived with the children, Maria greeted them at the door, her smile wide and her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Her daughter immediately noticed something different about her mother. There was a lightness in her step, a joy in her eyes that hadn't been there in a long time. Maria, normally reserved and cautious, was bubbling with energy as she watched her grandchildren tear into their gifts. They were so excited, so full of life, and for a moment Maria could forget about the pain, the fear, and the struggles of the past few years. She was surrounded by love, by family, and that was all that mattered. As the family gathered around the table for Christmas dinner, Carla asked, "Mom, you look like you've been through something. What happened last night?" Maria paused, her eyes drifting to the scattered gifts under the tree, some of them a little worse for wear after the ordeal. But despite everything, she felt no bitterness. Instead, she smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "I thought this Christmas would be just like any other," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "But something special happened last night. A man, a stranger, saved me. He didn't just save my presents, he saved my Christmas." Her voice trembled as she spoke, but there was no shame in her vulnerability. She had been afraid, and yet she had survived, and that, she realized, was a story worth telling. Carla listened, her face softening as Maria recounted the events of the previous night. She spoke of the motorcyclist, of his cruelty, and of Keanu's unexpected intervention. "You know, I thought I was going to lose everything," Maria continued, "but in the end, I didn't. I lost the gifts, but I didn't lose Christmas. And that's because of him, because of that man who stepped in and reminded me that there are still good people in this world." Maria looked at her daughter and grandchildren, a sense of peace settling over her. The presents were just things after all. They could be replaced, but the love, the safety, the warmth that she felt now, those were things that could never be taken away. Christmas, Maria had learned, was about more than what you could hold in your hands. It was about the people who held your heart, and for that she was grateful beyond measure. As the evening wore on, the laughter of her grandchildren filled the room, the air rich with stories and the sounds of family. Maria watched them, her heart swelling with gratitude, and as the night drew to a close, she found herself whispering a quiet thank you to the man who had changed everything for her. She didn't know who he was or where he had gone, but in her heart he would always be her Christmas hero. Maria sat by the window, her hands gently cradling a warm cup of coffee as she watched the snowflakes fall softly from the sky. It had been a few days since that unforgettable Christmas Eve, and the events of that night still felt like a dream. The darkness of the parking lot, the terror she had felt, the motorcyclist's cruel laughter, all of it had been wiped away by the unexpected arrival of a hero. Keanu Reeves, the man who had stepped out of the shadows and into her life at the most crucial moment, had turned what could have been a tragic Christmas into one that would be remembered for a lifetime. Maria couldn't help but think about him as she sat in the quiet of the morning, the world outside her window blanketed in peace. She thought back to how her world had shifted so suddenly, how, just a few hours before, she had been trapped in fear and uncertainty, her hands shaking as she clutched the bags that held her hopes for a joyful reunion with her daughter and grandchildren. But now, those same bags seemed so insignificant, the material things so small compared to the overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude that filled her heart. Keanu had given her something far more precious than the gifts she had so carefully chosen. He had given her the gift of safety, of peace, and most of all, he had given her the reminder that even in the most difficult times, there is always hope. As Maria stood up from the chair, she felt a familiar ache in her knees, a constant reminder of the years of wear and tear her body had endured. But this time, the pain didn't feel as heavy as it used to. She walked over to the window and looked out at the Christmas tree in the living room, its soft glow filling the space with warmth. Her grandchildren had returned to Germany with Carla, but the house still felt full. The love and joy they had brought lingered in every corner. And though she had lost the presents that night, what she had gained was so much more. She had gained a sense of resilience she hadn't known she possessed. Her mind wandered back to the moment when Keanu had stepped forward, so calm and unflinching in the face of danger. It was as though he had known exactly what to do, and somehow Maria had known that he would act. There had been no hesitation, no panic in his movements, just a quiet strength that seemed to resonate with everyone around him. Even the motorcyclist, who had been so brash and arrogant, had been taken aback by Keanu's resolve. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maria had felt like someone was truly watching out for her. It wasn't just the physical act of saving her from the motorcyclist. It was the way Keanu's presence had reminded her that she wasn't alone, even in the darkest moments. Maria's thoughts were interrupted as her daughter Carla called to check in. The sound of her voice brought a smile to Maria's face. "How's everything, Mom? How's your knee feeling?" Carla asked, her voice full of concern. "It's better, sweetheart," Maria replied, her voice warm but still a little shaken. "It hurts, but not as much as before. I'm just glad everything is over." Carla could hear the emotion in her mother's voice. "Are you sure you're okay? I can come back if you need me." Maria shook her head, even though Carla couldn't see her. "No, honey, you're with the kids. I'm fine. It's just been a lot to process. But I'm okay. We're okay." They spoke for a few more minutes, exchanging updates about the kids and making plans for when they would all be together again. As Maria hung up the phone, she felt a wave of emotion rise within her. The love of her family, the kindness of a stranger, and the strength she had found within herself had all come together to make this Christmas unlike any other. It wasn't the Christmas she had planned, but it was the Christmas she would always remember. Later that afternoon, Maria made her way to the kitchen to prepare dinner. The familiar smells of home filled the air, and for the first time in a long while, Maria felt a deep sense of contentment. It wasn't just because of the food or the decorations or even the gifts that had survived the night. It was the knowledge that she had been through something difficult, something terrifying, and had come out the other side stronger than she had ever imagined. As she moved around the kitchen, Maria thought about the lessons she had learned over the past few days. She had learned that life was fragile, that things could change in an instant, and that sometimes, even in the face of cruelty, there could be kindness. She had learned that the people who come into our lives, even for a moment, can change us in ways we never expected. And most importantly, she had learned that no matter how dark the world may seem, there are always people who will stand up, who will step forward and make a difference. Maria's thoughts drifted back to Keanu, the man who had reminded her that there was still goodness in the world. She never would have guessed that a stranger would be the one to save her Christmas, but in the end, that was exactly what had happened. And as she stood at the counter, chopping vegetables for dinner, Maria realized that Christmas wasn't just about the presents, the food, or the decoration. It was about the people we love and the people who love us, the kindness that we give and receive, and the hope that we carry with us, even in the most challenging moments. When Carla and the kids returned to visit in the new year, Maria had a story to tell. A story of how a man she would never see again had changed everything for her. And as she recounted the events of that night, her voice was steady, her heart full of gratitude. "Sometimes," she said, "heroes come when you least expect them, and sometimes they remind you that there's always something worth fighting for." And with that, Maria knew that her Christmas had been a reminder of something even more profound: the ability to hold on to hope, no matter what. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Maria's heart was full as she sat by the Christmas tree, the soft glow of the lights casting a warm golden hue over the room. It had been a week since the unsettling events in the parking lot, and she still found herself reflecting on the unexpected hero who had turned what could have been a nightmare into a memory of hope and resilience. Keanu's presence, so calm and determined, had been a stark contrast to the chaos and fear that had consumed her that night. He had reminded her of something important, something that many of us forget in the hustle and bustle of our everyday lives, that even in the darkest of times, there is always someone willing to stand up for what's right, someone who will step in when we need them most. Maria had never been one to ask for help, and in fact she often preferred to handle things on her own. But that night she realized that sometimes we don't have to face our struggles alone. There are people who will rise to the occasion, and their acts of kindness can change our lives in ways we never imagined. Keanu didn't just save her physical safety. He gave her back her belief in humanity, in the idea that goodness still exists in the world. And that, she realized, was the true spirit of Christmas. It wasn't about the presents or the decorations or even the food. It was about the people who show up for you when you least expect it, offering help, compassion, and kindness. Reflecting on this experience, Maria also thought about the lessons she had learned in the days that followed. She had learned that life is fragile and that we never know what might happen next. But she had also learned that we are stronger than we realize, and that the strength of others can help us find our way through the toughest of times. Keanu's intervention was a reminder that we should never take our safety or the kindness of others for granted. The world may sometimes feel cold and indifferent, but there are always those who will rise above it, who will step forward with the courage to make a difference. As Maria sat there, watching her family celebrate around her, she realized that the memory of that night, though painful at the time, had ultimately brought her closer to the people she loved. She had been able to share her story with Carla and the kids, teaching them that even in the face of fear, there is always room for hope. And through this, she felt more connected to them than ever before. Maria's story was one of struggle, but it was also one of triumph. It was a reminder that no matter what challenges we face, we are never truly alone. And that's why she wanted to share this message with others, because we all need a reminder that kindness, bravery, and hope are always within reach. So if you've been moved by Maria's story, and if you believe in the power of everyday heroes, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll join a community of people who are committed to sharing stories of courage, kindness, and resilience. Don't miss out on our future stories, stories that inspire, stories that remind us that even in the darkest times, there is always light. Subscribe today, and let's keep spreading hope together.